Good morning, honorable adjudicators, debaters, and respected audience. I am Aryah Alika, and I will be your chairperson for today's British parliamentary debate. The motion for today is, this House believes that influencers and content creators should be held legally responsible for the spread of the false informations. We will now begin the debate. I would like to start the debate by calling upon the Prime Minister to here.
Honorable adjudicators, members of the House, and today the opening government stand firmly in support of the motion. This House believes that influencer and content creators should be held legally responsible for the spread of false information. Before moving into our arguments, allow me to first clarify the key terms and outline the model of this debate, so that all teams can engage with the same understanding of the motion. In this debate, influencer and content creator are people who have a large number of followers and on platforms like Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, or X, and whose content can reach and affect many people. False information means statements that are presented as fact but are actually wrong and can cause real harm to the public, especially in areas such as health, finance, safety, or public policy. By legal responsibility, we mean that if an influencer spread harmful information, they can face reasonable legal consequences such as fine, being required to correct their content, or having their post removed. This doesn't punish personal opinions or small mistakes. It applies only to false information that creates serious public impact. Overall, this motion is about people who hold significant influence over the public and spread harmful factual errors should be legally required to take responsibility in order to protect society from real damage. With this definition in place, let me now present our team line. Our team line is simple. Public influence must come with public responsibility. Before moving into the argumentation, let me briefly explain our team split. As the Prime Minister, I will present two main arguments. First, influencer holds significant public power and therefore must hold public responsibility. And second, legal accountability is the only effective way to reduce the harm caused by misinformation. My Deputy Prime Minister will extend this case by analyzing the failures of current regulation and explaining why legal intervention is both proportional and necessary. Moving into the first argument, influencers today are not ordinary users. They have millions of followers who trust their opinions and treat their statement as credible information. Their content shapes public behavior, influence financial decisions, affect health choices, and even impact political attitudes because they receive financial benefit from sponsorship and other advertisement. Their influence carries real consequences. When an influencer spreads misinformation, the damage can be widespread, causing people to follow dangerous health advice or experience financial loss. If journalists and advertisers can face legal consequences for spreading false information, it is only fair that influencers who often have equal or greater reach are held to the same standard. The principle is clear. If you profit from the influencing the public, then you must also be responsible for the harm your influence creates. Moving on to the second argument, legal responsibility is necessary because it's the only consistent and effective mechanism to reduce misinformation. Current approaches such as platform guidelines, fact-check labels, or cancel culture are inconsistent and unreliable. Influencers can easily dismiss their misleading content by saying it is merely an opinion, even when it causes public panic or financial damage. Legal accountability creates a strong deterrent. Influencers will think before posting, verify their information, and avoid promoting unverified claims. This protects the public, especially vulnerable audiences such as teenagers and individuals with low media literacy, who are easily influenced by online personalities. To clarify the policy, you are not targeting small mistakes or personal opinions. The legal standard applies only to misinformation with significant public impact, such as health, safety, or financial claims that are presented as factual information. The consequences also don't need to be harsh. Proportional measures such as fine, mandatory correction, or take-down order are sufficient. This ensures the policy is reasonable, targeted, and focused on presenting real harm. In conclusion, because influencer possesses enormous persuasive power, and because legal accountability is the only effective way to prevent harmful misinformation, the opening government strongly support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, the Prime Minister, for the speech. I would like to call upon the Leader of Opposition to open the case from the opposition bench. Here.
Honorable adjudicators, members of the House, as opening opposition, we strongly oppose this motion. First, on the definition, we accept the government's characterization of influencers and content creators as high-reach online personalities on platforms like TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, or X. We also accept that false information in this debate refers to harmful factual claims in sensitive areas such as health, finance, safety, and public policy, and that legal responsibility means mechanisms like fines, mandatory correction, and take-down order, not prison or criminalization of ordinary opinions. Even under this narrow and seemingly reasonable scope, this policy remains unworkable, unfair, and dangerous to public discourse. Our theme line is misinformation should be tackled by strengthening platforms, education, and existing targeted laws, not by placing broad legal liability on individual influencers. And for the team's plate is that I will bring two arguments. The first one is that legal liability is unworkable and arbitrary in practice. Second one is that this model creates a serious chilling effect on public discourse. And from our deputy leader of opposition will add a third argument. Alternative solution, platform regulation, media literacy, and existing fraud or defamation laws are more effective and less harmful than this proposal. Opening government gives two main claims: that influencers have public power, so must bear public responsibility, and that legal accountability is the only effective way to reduce misinformation. But their comparison with journalists and advertisers is flawed because those actors have institutions, editors, and legal teams behind them, while many influencers are just individuals or small groups with no such protection. Meaning the law will hit the least resource, not necessarily the most harmful. They also never show how their law would work in complex, involving areas like health or economics, where deciding what is false is contested and expert views change. This either breeds debate around an official truth or leads to inconsistent, politicized enforcement. Finally, their supposedly narrow focus on serious public impact with proportional sanction is actually extremely broad, covering most meaningful public discussion and pushing rational influencer either to avoid these topics or to repeat only the same as official narratives, with fines and forced correction being devastating for mid-tier creators. Even if we accept their framing, the policy ends up being overbroad, selectively enforced, and structurally biased against smaller or dissenting voices. Our first argument is that liability sounds neat in theory but cannot be applied fairly in practice. Determining what is false information is not straightforward. Many statements online are a mixture of fact, interpretation, and prediction. In health, economics, and politics, evidence is in conflict. Studies conflict and consensus shift. If the law must draw a hard line for punishment, it either elevates one authority, such as government, agency, or a single set of experts into the sole arbiter of truth, or it generates inconsistent court decisions where similar statements are treated differently depending on the judge, jurisdiction, or political climate. Next, causation is almost impossible to pin down. Government wants to target misinformation that causes real harm, but people rarely act so lightly based on one post. They see friends, mainstream news, other influencers, and their own biases. To prove liability, you would need to show that a particular influencer content substantially caused or contributed to a specific harm. Either the evidentiary bar is high and virtually no case succeeds, making the law symbolic and arbitrary. But the bar is lower and influencer can be punished based on draft, association, or public outrage which is even worse. This doesn't just reduce the quantity of misinformation, it narrows the entire range of ideas and conversation available to the public. In particular, marginalized or counter-hegemonic voices are hit. Community activists exposing government failures, independent commentators questioning corporate narratives, and minority experts challenging dominant school of thought are all more likely to be labeled as misleading before they are recognized as important dissenter. The threat of being sued or fined is enough to deter them from speaking out, even if they never actually go to court. Moreover, this proposal changes the nature of social media itself. Influencers started as everyday people sharing experiences and advice in a relatively informal environment, turning that space into one where every factual statement could carry legal risk pushes it closer to formal broadcasting. But without the institutional support that broadcasters have, instead of fostering a more critical, media literate audience, this model tells people to trust only what is legally safe, which often overlaps with what is officially sanctioned, not what is true. Finally, this burden is not unequal. Large corporation and celebrity influencer can hire lawyers, do formal risk assessment, and negotiate settlements. Small but emerging creators cannot. Faced with the same law, the powerful adapt, while small creators either silence themselves, when important issues are get selectively targeted because they are easier to question. So, instead of distributing responsibility fairly, the law entrenches existing power inequalities. A policy that is impossible to implement consistently. It implies selective enforcement and structurally favors the already powerful is not a responsible way to address misinformation. And the second argument is that even if the law were enforceable, its impact on speech and democratic discussion is deeply damaging. Under the threat of legal consequences, the rational choice for influencers is to avoid any content that could later be framed as harmful misinformation. That means avoiding topics like health, finance, public safety, crime, or policy, precisely the areas where fresh perspective, personal experience, and critical process can be most valuable. What remains when serious controversial or minority perspective are driven on? Misinformation may become less visible at the margin, but the public becomes much more vulnerable to large-scale misinformation from powerful actors who can navigate or manipulate the liability framework that is worse information ecosystem, not a better one. So, on our side, you get a world where misinformation is recognized as a serious problem, but addressed through smarter platform design, media literacy, and targeted use of existing laws against clear fraud, defamation, or incitement. On government side, you get a sweeping legal liability that is unworkable, unfairly enforced, and deeply chilling to free and diverse discourse. But for all this reason, opening opposition is brought to us. Thank you.
Thank you, the leader opposition, for the speech. I call upon Deputy Prime Minister to close the case from opening government. Hear, hear.
Honorable adjudicators, members of the House, as the Deputy Prime Minister, my task today is to strengthen the foundation laid by my Prime Minister and extend our case with further analysis that proves why legal accountability for influencers is both necessary and proportional. First, let me briefly reaffirm the PM's stances. She has shown that influencers today hold massive public power and therefore must carry public responsibility. She has also demonstrated that voluntary systems like platform, guidelines, or fact-check labels are inconsistent and ineffective. If influencers profit from influencing the public, they must also face consequences when they cause harm. For the first extension is the platform-based regulation is fundamentally failing. Building on the PM's case, I will explain why the current system cannot solve misinformation no matter how much we improve it. First, platform profit from misinformation. Content that is controversial or sensational spreads quickly, generating views and ad revenue. Platforms have no real incentive to moderate aggressively. For the second one is algorithm reward virality, not accuracy. False information travels faster than any correction. Even if a post is fact-checked later, the damage is irreversible. Third, influencers can bypass platform rules easily. They can delete posts, make backup accounts, or claim it's just entertainment, escaping long-term responsibility. The fourth one is self-regulation doesn't fix harm. Even when misinformation is removed, the correction rarely reach the same audience. The harm persists while the influencer faces no consequences. Because these failures are structural, not accidental, platform regulation alone will never be enough. Legal accountability becomes necessary as a neutral, external mechanism that platform cannot manipulate. For the second extension is legal accountability protects free speech, not suppresses it. The opposition will likely claim this policy harms free expression. That is incorrect. Our model is narrow, proportional, and focused on the public safety. For the first one is we regulate factual claims, not opinions. You can say I dislike vaccine, but you cannot say this juice cures cancer, but it really doesn't. And the second one is consequences are proportional. We propose fines, mandatory correction, and takedown orders. No one is going to jail. This mirrors the existing standard applied to journalists and advertisers. Third, clear rules reduce fear, not create it. When influencers know what counts as harmful misinformation, they are less afraid of accidental mistake and more motivated to verify facts. For the fourth one is better online safety is better speech. When harmful misinformation decreases, accurate and responsible voices gain visibility, public discourse improves, not shrinks. Thus, our model strengthens the quality of speech, not silences it. Then the third extension is the real-world harm of misinformation is too severe to ignore. Finally, let me address the scale of harm caused by influencer misinformation. From the health, fakers, extreme diets, and anti-science claims have led to hospitalization and medical emergencies. From the finance, fraudulent investment tips and unregulated crypto schemes cause real economic loss. And from public safety, false information during crisis triggers public panic and unsafe behavior. And from the vulnerable groups, teenagers and low literary audience are highly susceptible and easily manipulated. Content deletion after the harm is done is not enough. Without legal responsibility, influencers can repeatedly cause real-world damage with no deterrence. And from the conclusion, as a Deputy Prime Minister, I have shown that current platform systems are structurally incapable of stopping misinformation. Legal accountability is narrow, proportional, and protective of speech. And the last one is the society harm caused by influencer is too serious and to be ignored. Combined with the PM's foundation, our message is clear. When you hold public influencer, you must also hold public responsibility. And for these reasons, the opening government proudly support the motion.
Thank you, the Deputy Prime Minister, for the speech. To close the opening half of the debate, I call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition, here.
Honorable adjudicators, member of the House, as Deputy Leader of the Opposition, I will continue to dismantle the government case by addressing their extensions and rebuilding the opposition essential arguments and introducing a crucial third point on alternative solutions. The Deputy Prime Minister argues platforms are inherently flawed and legal responsibility for influencer is necessary. Yet, this exacerbates platform failures and oversimplifies complex realities. Platform regulation is not fundamentally broken. Platforms increasingly improve transparency, enhance fact-checking partnership, and develop community guidelines. They adapt dynamically to evolving misinformation trends, something law enforcement cannot do with the same agility. Legal responsibility ignores the nuance of misinformation. The Deputy Prime Minister claims legals mean proportional and targeted, but their framework is unclear on defining what constitutes false information in fluid areas like health or finance. This risks either rigid censorship or arbitrary enforcement influenced by the political or commercial interests. Free speech protection is illusory under this model. Even narrow laws create chilling effects on influencers preemptively self-censor to avoid fines or takedowns, suppressing important but controversial viewpoints. The government promised that opinions remain untouched is not practical. Factual claims and interpretation often blur lines, especially in public discourse. Our opening oppositions emphasize two main points. Legal liability is unworkable and create chilling effects on speech. I now reinforce this. Defining false information is an elusive goal, rulings and undermining public trust and the law legitimacy. The difficulty of proving causation between a single influencer cause and societal harms remains insurmountable. Chilling effect on discourse. The threat of legal consequence will push influencers to avoid sensitive topics altogether, depriving the public of the plurality of voices and perspective vital for democratic deliberations. Marginalized or dissenting voices, typically more vulnerable to legal pressure, will disproportionately silenced. So instead of imposing broad legal responsibility on influencers, misinformation is better tackled through strengthening platform regulation, enhancing media literacy, and using existing targeted laws. These alternatives are more practical, fair, and respectful of free speech. The government legal framework focuses on penalizing content creators directly, but this approach ignores the complex ecosystem where misinformation spreads. Platforms have unique technological tools and incentives when properly harnessed can reduce false information more effectively and at scale. Meanwhile, educating the public builds long-term resilience, equipping individuals to critically evaluate information rather than rely solely on external policy. Lastly, existing laws targeted fraud, defamation, and incitement already provide a proportional and targeted mechanism to address genuinely harmful misinformation cases without risking broad censorship or arbitrariness. Platform improvement. Several leading platforms such as YouTube and TikTok have invested heavily in AI-driven fact-checking and transparent content moderations. For example, independent audit shows that TikTok misinformation removal rates increased significantly after algorithm adjustment, prioritizing authoritative sources. These measures adapt quickly to the new misinformation trends, unlike legal systems that move slowly through court processes. Besides that, countries like Finland and Slovakia have integrated comprehensive media literacy into their education system, resulting in a public that demonstrably better at spotting misinformation and less likely to share false claims. According to a 2023 study by the European Media Literacy Index, population with higher media literacy report lower trust in the unverified online information and actively seek credible sources. So, by using the targeted use of existing law, fraud and defamation laws have successfully addressed high-profile misinformation cases such as false investment schemes promoted online without gaining new legal burdens on content creators broadly. These precedents show that targeted legal action can punish clearly malicious misinformation without chilling general speech. Therefore, this alternative solution respects the complexity of misinformation and the need to balance regulation with free expressions. They avoid the government overbroad, unworkable legal regimes and ensure a safer, more informed public discourse without silencing dissent or smaller voices. For these reasons, the opposition maintains that legal responsibility for influencers is neither necessary nor the best approach. The opening government cases relies on oversimplified assumptions about the truth, responsibility, and enforcement capability. Legal liability for influencers is unworkable, create a chilling effect on important public debate, and ignore more nuanced, effective solutions. We stand firm that misinformation is best countered through smarter platform policies, education, and existing precise laws, not the broad, arbitrary, and rights-threatening legal regime proposed by the government. Honorable chairs, for fairness, free speeches, and resilient information ecosystem, the opposition urges rejection of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, the Deputy Leader of Opposition, for the speech. To open the closing half, I would like to call upon the Member of Government here.
Honorable educators, distinguished member of the House, and respected audience, as a closing government, we strongly support the motion that influencers and content creators should be held legally responsible for the spread of the false information. In today's digital landscape, online influence is a real form of social power, and whatever power creates the possibility of public harm, it is entirely legitimate and necessary for the law to step in and protect society. Our team line is built on this principle. Those who shape public behavior at scale must be accountable when their action causes damage. Our team split is clear. As a member of government, I will reinforce opening government, respond to the key opposition's claim, and then deliver our unique extension explaining how legal responsibility reinform the incentive structure of the influencer economy. The government whip will later summarize our entire bans without adding new arguments. Opening government established that influencers often have reach equal to or greater than journalists and broadcasters, but with none of professional safeguards. They showed that misinformation, especially in areas like health, finance, and public safety, can cause real harm, from dangerous medical decisions to financial loss. We fully support these directions. If influencers benefit from public trust, sponsorship money, and algorithm reach, then they cannot be exempt from accountability when their claims inflict harm. Current measurements such as platform guidelines, fact-checking labels, or voluntary corrections simply do not work. Platform prioritize engagement, not accuracy. Influencers delete content if one backlash appear, but the damage is already done. Without legal standards, harmful false information continues to spread unhacked. Oppositions argue that this policy chills free speech. This is incorrect. The government's model applies only to factual claims presented as true, not opinions, not jokes, and not personal stories. Saying I dislike vaccinates is allowed. Saying this herb cures cancers is not, because that claims directly endangers lives. Examples law already make these distinctions for journalists and advertisers. Influencers should be not exceptions. Second, they claim enforcement is unclear or politically biased, but court already handled questions of harm, evidence, and falsity in cases like false advertising, medical negligence, and financial fraud. We are simply extending existing legal logic to a new group of public communicators. Finally, their use platform should be responsible instead of individuals. But platform cannot screen millions of posts instantly, nor should they act as the sole arbiter of truth. Responsibility must lie with the person who created and spread harmful misinformation, because they are the ones shaping behavior. Let me now move to the unique contributions from policy government. Our extensions, which explain how legal accountability corrects the structural flaw in the influential economy and creates long-term improvement for society. At the heart of the problem is the side of work incentive. Influencers today are rewarded almost entirely for visibility and engagement, not accuracy. The more dramatic or sensational a claim is, the faster it spreads and the more profitable it becomes. This system actively encourages creators to post content that is exaggerated, misleading, or simply false, because doing so brings attention, followers, and sponsorship. When we introduce legal responsibility for harmful misinformation, we fundamentally shift this incentive structure. Creators will now think that carefully before posting unverified claims, because the cost of the carelessness becomes greater than the reward of virality. In this way, the law redirects the entire ecosystem toward responsibility instead of forgiveness. Legal accountability also plays a key role in professionalizing the industry. Unlike journalism, medicine, finance, or broadcasting, all fields that influence public decision-making, influencers currently operate with no ethical code, no verification standard, and no duty of care. Anyone with a smartphone can reach millions without understanding the consequences of their statements. Once accountability is introduced, influencers begin adopting practices that are considered standard in more regulated fields. Fact-checking claims, consulting specialists, providing proper disclaimer, and verifying sources before publishing. Content agencies, managing teams, and brand partners will also become more cautious, creating built-in system of review and verifications. In other words, our policy left the entire industry into a more responsible and credible foundations. In the long run, this policy produced a healthier digital culture for everyone. When influential creators consistently share content that is accurate and properly verified, audience become less vulnerable to scam, harmful trends, and manipulative narrative. Over time, trust began to rebuild, not because people are forced to believe creators, but because creators become more careful and reliable. The next generation of influencers grows up in an environment where responsibility is the norm, not an optional bonus. As a result, the digital world evolved into a space where information is more trustworthy, harm is reduced, and public discourse become more grounded and constructive. This long-term conscious shift is something only our bench provides, and it is essential for solving the root of the problem, not merely treating the symptoms. Closing government strengthened the foundation laid by our opening team, refutes opposition misconception, and showed that legal responsibility is not only possible, but essential. Our extension proved that this policy relies incentive, professionalizes the influencer economy, and builds long-term digital safety. Influence is power, and power must come with responsibility. For this reason, we are proud to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, member of the government, for the speech. We call upon the member of opposition to open the closing opposition side of the House. Hear, hear.
Honorable adjudicators, members of the House and audiences, as closing opposition, we stand firmly against the motion that influencers and content creators should be held legally responsible for the spread of false information. Our team line is that we believe misinformation is harmful and harmful. But a blanket legal liability on individual influencers is structurally unworkable, chills legitimate speech, and throws out smarter systemic solution. Opening opposition has already shown why the government model is arbitrary in practice and damaging for public discourse. This bench will defend that direction and prove that even under government's narrow framing, the harms intensify when law tries to police truth at influencer level. Our team's lead is, as member of opposition, I will first defend opening opposition case, continue refute open government, and refute specific argumentation of closing government. Then I will add two new arguments for opposition. First, that this model backfires by entrenching powerful misinformation while scapegoating small creators. Second, that small regulation of platforms and audiences, not individual legal liability, is apparently more effective at reducing harm. The opposition will then summarize the entire debate for the point of view of the opposition and defending the general viewpoint of both opposition teams without bringing any new arguments. Opening government gave us two big claims that influencers have public power so must face legal liability, and that only law can effectively reduce misinformation, but comparative work on disinformation laws that once states try to legally define false information, enforcement quickly becomes politicized and inconsistent. And courts struggle to separate fact, interpretation, and prediction, so narrowing liability to serious harm just turn any high-stake debate in health, finance, or politics into a legal risk that deters plural voice and whistleblower. The cooperation to journalists and advertisers also failed because those are usually inside institutions with editors, compliance team, and legal protection, whereas influencers and community activists are isolated individuals on personality-driven platforms, meaning the same liability bias asymmetrically. The standards are so high that almost no case is prosecuted, and the laws become symbolic and selectively used, or standards are low enough that any controversial take which later age barely can trigger sanctions, creating exactly the chilling effect on smaller dissenting creators that opening opposition were about. Member of government said legal liability fixes their incentive and professionalized influencer, but evidence showed that the real engine of harmful content is platform design, where algorithms reward emotional, sensational posts regardless of legal risk. Studies on influencer and consumer protection find that many already ignore existing disclosure and advertising rules when engagement and brand deals are on the line, meaning adding another layer of liability does not magically create new strong style ethics culture. Comparative research on fake news laws show that they are frequently used to find and pressure critical media rather than to reform structural incentive. So in practice, this model is far more likely to chill smaller and dissenting voices than to transform the influencer economy into something genuinely trustworthy. Next, I will bring my argument for the extension of the case. Even if some information is reduced at the margins, the government model entrenches the most coordinated misinformation from powerful actors while scapegoating small and mid-time creators. Large platform reports that they are proactively remove well over 90% of clearly flagged harmful misinformation, often before any views, yet systemic narrative from powerful organizations still circulate because they are framed as opinion or just asking questions. While small influencers who repeat or criticize them are for easier legal targets. Research show that most damaging content is not one-off lies, but coordinated repeated messaging that blends half-truth, ideology, and commercial incentive, including documented cases where vaccine-related misinformation is tied to selling wellness products across multiple accounts and brands, so the real mastermind sit behind layers of fraud while visible faces take the hit. Under the government's model, authorities are pushed to go after those visible individuals with the weakest legal protection, while the complex networks behind campaigns continue largely untouched, and one the state becomes arbiter of truth backed by fines and legal orders. Minority expert and community activists will rationally pull back from challenging dominant narrative, producing a more homogeneous and manipulated information space, not a genuinely safer one. If the aim is to actually reduce harm, comparatively favor systemic platform regulation and media literacy over individual legal liability. TikTok's on transparency report under regional codes show proactively remove rates for harmful information about roughly 90% in some jurisdictions, often before any views or within about a day, which demonstrate that adjusting recommender systematic non-speed cut spread at scale in a way occasional lawsuit against single influencer ever can. On the audience side, countries that heavily invest in media literacy like Finland consistently rank at the top of European Media Literacy Index and show lower susceptibility to online disinformation, with curricula that good critical thinking from early schooling and highlighted in OECD work as a core tool for societal resilience. Even in the worst case, existing advertising, securities, and consumer protection laws have already been used to fund celebrity offer undisclosed or misleading crypto and to tackle false health or investment claims, proving that clear fraud and information can be punished without a new vague liability that rests over policing speech, while opposition model combines tools that already work with scalable reforms that actually change behavior. In short, legal liability on individual influential leaves coordinated, well-resourced misinformation network intact while chilling smaller minority and critical voice, making the information space more homogeneous and easier to manipulate. At the same time, evidence from platform transparency reports, media literacy leaders like Finland, and existing enforcement against fraud and misleading promotions demonstrate that systemic platform regulation, education, and targeted laws that already offer a more effective and less restrictive way to reduce real harm from misinformation. Thank you.
Thank you, Member of Opposition, for his speech. To close the case from whole government bench, I call upon Government Whip. Hear.
Honorable adjudicators, member of the House, as Government Whip, my role is to show why the proposition clearly wins this debate. Influencers today hold unprecedented power over public beliefs and behaviors, often comparable to or greater than traditional media, yet operate with almost no formal obligation despite the very real harms caused by misinformation in health, finance, and public life. In a world where a single post can reach millions and trigger serious damage, It is both fair and necessary that this power comes with legal responsibility. Opening government first establishes that influencers are not ordinary users, but public actors who provide from attention and trust, meaning their misinformation can foreseeable lead to physical harm, financial loss, and public panic. They argued that if journalists and advertisers can be liable for harmful false claims, then influencers with equivalent reach should be held to similar standard through targeted measures like fines, maintenance corrections, and takedown orders for harmful factual misinformation in critical domains such as health, safety, and finance. The Deputy Prime Minister further showed why platform-based regulation structurally fails. Algorithms are designed to reward virality. Platforms profit from engagement, and correction never travel as far as the initial lie, which means community guidelines and fact-check levels cannot reliably prevent or repair harm. She also demonstrated that our model is narrow and speech protective, regulating only demonstrable false factual claims that cause significant harm aligned already recognized in areas like fraud, false advertising, and certain health or election-related disinformation. Forcing government that explain how legal accountability does more than just punish individual bad actors, it reshapes the incentive of the entire influencer economy. At present, sensational and misleading content is systematically rewarded with reach, sponsorship, and status, which passes creators toward exaggeration and misinformation because it is profitable. When legal responsibility is introduced, then the expected cost of spreading harmful falsehoods rises, encouraging influencers and their teams to fact-check, seek expert input, and use disclaimer before making serious factual claims, mirroring duties already imposed on other powerful communicators. This, in turn, begins to professionalize the industry and build a healthier digital culture. Agencies, brands, and platforms develop internal vetting process while audiences gradually encounter more accurate and less reckless content in high-stakes domains. Over time, this reduces harm, strengthens public trust, and ensures that those who shape behavior at scale do so with a baseline duty of care, rather than treating influencers as a risk-free path to profit. So, opposition concerned about free speech and enforcement ignore that many legal systems already accept limits on harmful falsehoods, particularly where there is attainable harm, and courts routinely adjudicate issues of falsity, causation, and damage in analogous areas like fraud and negligent misrepresentation. What they never provide is a realistic alternative mechanism that both protects vulnerable audiences and addresses the structural incentives that keep misinformation profitable and pervasive. So in conclusion, the proposition bench shows that in a world where influencers wield immense power to shape behavior and beliefs, it is no longer acceptable for them to spread harmful falsehood without consequence. By imposing clear, proportionate legal responsibility only for serious, harmful misinformation in critical areas like health, finance, and public safety, our model aligns influencers with standards already applied to other powerful communicators while preserving space for opinions and genuine expressions. This does not just punish wrongdoing, it rewires incentives across the entire influencer economy toward due diligence, honesty, and care, protecting vulnerable audiences and rebuilding public trust in the digital sphere. Thank you.
Thank you, the government whip, for the speech. To close the entire debate, we call upon the opposition whip. Hear, hear.
Honorable adjudicators, member of the House,
Ladies and gentlemen, as an opposition whip, this speech will do three things. First, to clarify what this debate is really about. Second, to defend the work of opening opposition. And the third is to highlight why closing opposition gives you strong reason to reject this motion. So, this debate is about misinformation, bad, therefore no good. Everyone in this room agrees that misinformation is harmful and dangerous. The real question is, do we fix that harm by turning every influencer into a legally liable broadcaster? Or by fixing the system that actually drives what people see, share, and believe? On the government side, the solution is to punish individual influencers when things go wrong. And on the opposition side, the solution is to reform platform, empower audience, and use target laws that already exist. If the government mechanism is unworkable, chills legitimate speech, and this is the real driver of harm, then no matter how noble of the intention, this motion must fail. Let's start with the opening opposition brings to this debate. So first they show you legal liability is unworkable and arbitrary. Determining what counts as false online is subjective because most content mix facts and opinion. This will either centralize authority, it overshoot or lead to inconsistent rulings. Proving causation between a cause and harm is nearly impossible, and lowering the proof turns risk, punishing people unfairly. Second, opening opposition is when the chilling effect this law would have on public discourse. It harms free expression, as the fear of being sued or fined will lead creators to avoid complex or controversial topics such as health, politics, and finance. The voices most likely to be silenced are those of independent creators and marginalized communities, leaving only dominant and safe perspective in the conversation, which ultimately weakens public discourse. And third, opening opposition argued that better alternative exists. Government should rely on existing laws such as those addressing fraud, defamation, and consumer protection, while also strengthening platform accountability and promoting media literacy, rather than imposing new and ambiguous legal penalties on misinformation. Overall, opening opposition demonstrates that legal liability for online misinformation is impractical, repressive, and unnecessary. Closing opposition tells you why this motion is not just ineffective but actively dangerous. First, it protects the powerful and punishes the weak. This about to actually survive in a world where speaking inequality can get used. It's not the independent creator, the community educator, or the small political commentator. It's the corporation, political campaigns, and mega influencer who can afford entire legal teams. They'll frame their misinformation as just asking questions or simply pay the fines as part of doing business. Worse, they can even use this law to intimidate or silence smaller voices who try to challenge them. So instead of creating fairness, this law entrance inequality, it shields the strong and targets the vulnerable. Second, we tell you that system-level solutions work better in the real world. Misinformation doesn't thrive because of one bad influencer. It's spread because of broken algorithms, so moderation and audience who haven't been given the skill to think critically. When platforms fix their recommendation system, when government invests in the media literacy, and when regulators use existing law against fraud or deliberate deception, that's when we see a real result. You don't need to criminalize a conversation to fight misinformation effectively. So, in the end, closing opposition show you that this motion doesn't make us safer, it just concentrates power in the hand of those who already have it, while silencing the voice who actually make the internet the first and democratic. So, how should this debate be decided? On the first class, workability and fairness, the government never show how its model survives changing science, misfact opinion, content, or complex causation. Opposition shows that attempts to define and prove harmful false information either fail or become dangerously broad and politicized, and that arbitrariness falls on those with the least power. On the second class, impact on speech and democracy, government at the best marginally reduce some reckless content, but at the cost of wiping out whole categories of legitimate, critical, and minority speech, while well-resourced with information adapt and survive. And on the third class, To actually reduce harm, government relies on punishing individuals after the effect of having death tolerance scales. Opposition offer proactive structural tools that target the injuries of which and increase resilience. And opposing opposition with the principle and mechanistic claim, this law is impossible to apply consistently, deeply challenging and unnecessary. Classing opposition with the strategic claim, this law requires the information ecosystem in favor of the most powerful, while better tools remain available and their use. Taken as a bench, the opposition offers a world where misinformation is tackled through smarter platform, stronger citizen and access legal tools, not through a broad speech policing regime aimed at influencers. For a free, fair, and more resilient information space, this House must stand with both opening and closing opposition and reject this motion. Thank you.
Thank you to all speakers and thank you for your participation.